Welcome to Just the Tip-Sters. This episode almost made me want to poke my ears out with pencils. And here's my wonderful guest host, Angelique, who's going to try and make it sound so much better than it did before. Hello, beautiful.
Hello.
I was going to tell you your workout outfit is quite spectacular. It looks a little bit like a Matisse painting. It's feminine and beautiful and colorful.
I have a friend who just so wants me to work out. And so every year for my birthday, which passed in January, she buys me a fabulous outfit.
It is fabulous.
Hoping that I will work out.
And where did you come from before you came here today?
I came
You
from
worked
working out.
Why do you act like you don't work out?
I don't work out.
You go to a place near me and you describe the trainer to a T, including shaved head and tattoos, and she's a girl, and you work out. Don't act like you don't.
I just got a personal trainer because I'm too lazy to go work out. I won't even roll out of bed and do 5 minutes of yoga in the morning. How hard is that? You know, since the pandemic, everybody's got the online stuff, and so it's so easy, these cute little 10-minute yoga things in the morning. I won't do it. You know, I'm going to walk at lunch during lunch. I'm not walking during lunch break.
No, if I did not have Siren Marie bitch face Morgan Humphreys, I'm fairly sure I would have bed sores because I would not get up. But having her, I get up every morning pretty early and walk her, and I walk her at night. And that is pretty much it for me. And you're talking to someone who taught yoga for 16 years. And online ain't cutting it, girl, for teaching or practicing in my mind.
Well, I was going to say yoga tapes, but they're certainly not tapes anymore. I have DVDs that I like, and then there's a girl on YouTube that I like.
That's a wonderful thing. It's also not the same.
No, absolutely not. It's not the same as you
in person.
Oh my gosh, you're putting the lovely
oil
on my, temples and the satchel of fragrant whatever, and you pushing my head down, and, absolutely not. But it's better than nothing.
No, I think that's a very good way to look at it. I just couldn't. I had, so many sweet people who were like, will you please do an online class? And no one ever talked like that. That's my impression of them. And I can't. I feel like yoga is an in-person thing. I just do.
Well, I loved your yoga classes.
Well, thank you.
I remember you were doing hip openers. It was a class you taught out here, and you were doing hip openers, and whatever was going on, tears just poured out of me. Do you remember that? Oh my gosh.
I'll be honest, no, but it happens all the time.
I was so embarrassed.
Never.
I mean,
never.
Me crying in front of people is like crazy. So for me to be laying in a yoga class on some little purple pillow with my hips opening, and it wasn't crying in pain, it was just something happened.
Absolutely.
And you were like, it happens. It's not
all the time.
Why
do you think there are tissues in every yoga class? It's not because people have allergies.
I thought it was because people have allergies.
No, well, that too. But it's mostly because, we could do an entire podcast on this, but we are, as human beings, we hold these things cellularly. I know I do. Maybe not everyone does. But if I don't let them out, it's going to come out as an injury, or I'm going to, eat an entire cheesecake or whatever.
It comes out perfect. That's what I did for President's Day.
You did not. Do you know I've had dudes, big, strong dudes, cry in class. And I know you're not a big crier, whereas I'm a crier all the time. Mm-hmm. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when it's Tuesday, just because it's Tuesday. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. But yoga class, it depends on the pose. And ironically, where do we hold a lot of our feelings and emotions? In our hip area.
And nobody knows that unless they do yoga.
Well,
because I would say, if you ask me where do you hold the most tension, I would say the jaw, because we do a lot of, or maybe right in between the eyebrows where we're constantly frowning, and I would never think the hips.
Okay, that's two different things. I hold all my tightness and tension in my shoulders. Oh, yeah. This is feelings and emotions, not tightness and tension. I'm going to say it's connected to our gut. when we feel things in our gut, if we pay attention to our gut, that's probably a great thing. But literally, they say women hold more feelings and emotions in their hip area than men. But I'm telling you what, girl, try and get a dude to do a hip opener. It's a journey. And I've had big, strong dudes cry and say, I don't know what happened. But I was like, it's okay. You don't have to know. You do not have to attach anything to it. I mean, I love soma. I love the somatic experience of the body. And I'm really somatic. 20 years ago, a woman touched my shoulder when we were doing partner yoga, which I despise because I don't want anyone else touching me. And I like turned around, I whipped around at her and was angry at her because it was my grandmother. My grandmother was in my shoulder, not literally in my shoulder, but something I felt the feeling, the emotion of an experience with my crazy grandmother the second she touched a certain spot.
Wow.
Yeah. And everything you're saying, whether you know it or not, because you didn't know what was happening, kind of lends itself to the case we're covering today, which I'm going to get to. But the detective was and this is in Texas, big, strong country boy detective, felt things, and that guided him to solve cases. I've actually never heard a detective be this open with wanting to be at a crime scene after everything was over because he could feel what happened.
Wow.
I know. I love this. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start in this case. I wanted to say thank you to Tipster Allison, who sent me a box of like a million different things, including but not limited to candles, eyeshadow, makeup brushes, a light up unicorn holder for my hand sanitizer, and a journal that says Chaos Coordinator. It's like she knows me. It's like she knows me. And I wanted to say thank you to Tipster Amanda, who's the newest patron on Patreon, and a few people who've left really nice reviews since Mark passed away. And I'm very amazed that everyone is so understanding and you're still saying nice things about the podcast, even though I haven't been able to have, constant updated content, but that's changing. Angelique is whipping me into shape. She's a wonderful captain. She's going to kick my ass and we're going to do this and it's going to become more regular, I promise. And this case this week was sent to me from Dorota from Poland, who became a patron on Patreon, my first patron from Poland. And she's a beautiful gem of a human being. This case is so fascinating. It's got so many twists and turns, so many layers. I didn't even tell Angelique this, but we're going to do a multi-part because I can't do it all in one episode. Okay. We were talking earlier before we started recording about making decisions, and I have been working on this case. I looked at my notes since January 22nd, trying so hard to condense it into one episode. And about an hour before you got here, I was like, I'm doing it. I'm making a decision. I hadn't offered that to my own soul to make it more than one episode.
It's your show.
Well, I know, but I don't even give myself permission. You know that. That's why I'm so glad you're my captain. Seriously, I'm just a soldier here.
Thank you. I can't swim, right?
You don't have to. You stand on the ship and say, get in the water, dumbass, and start swimming. And that's a beautiful thing because I need direction. But it was like an hour before you got here and I was like panicking. I'm like, I have 80 pages of notes and articles.
Wow.
80 pages. Right. That's this case. It's a literally decades old case. It happened in 1982. I mean, when I say decades old case, it really only stopped in the end of 2021 when the lead investigator passed away. And he wasn't even the lead investigator the entire time. He moved on to a different law enforcement agency, but would never let this case go. So let's get into this. This is the 1982 Lake Waco murders. It's Texas, people. So hang on for the ride. This is going to be episode 1, and we're going to do, it probably deserves 4 episodes, but we're going to at least do 2. And it's the murder of Rayleen Rice, Kenneth Franks, and Jill Montgomery, 3 teenagers. They were just like seniors in high school. They were killed by, depending on what you believe, 2 people, 3 people, or 4 people. And for a myriad of reasons. All crappy, as you know. They're all there's never a good reason to kill someone unless it's self-defense. Even then, I don't know why cops don't shoot people in the leg. I know, and I'm going to get so many people yelling at me saying they have to shoot center mass. They have to, Since I was a kid, I was like, can't they just hit him in the kneecap? No, that's not the way they're trained. But anyway, so in July of 1982, these 3 young kids are doing what a lot of young kids do in the summer, probably drinking, maybe smoking things that in 1982 are illegal in Texas. And they are enjoying themselves at a big lake in Texas, in Waco. So Kenneth Franks had known Jill Montgomery from kind of I wouldn't call it a halfway house, but they were both kids who had kind of a difficult childhood. And they knew each other there, and they kind of liked each other. And Kenneth had wanted to date Jill. So he asks Jill, hey, can I pick you up and we go hang out at the lake? And she said, sure, my friend Rayleen is with me and she's really cute. And he's like, great, I'll try and get a friend. Well, his friend wasn't available, which saved his friend's life, quite frankly.
Wow.
So the 3 of them get together, cash Jill's paycheck, and they head to the lake. I also want to mention, actually, right now, there's great information about this case from Texas Monthly, does an amazing article. The Waco Tribune had great coverage of the case over years and years. And there was actually even a book called Careless Whispers by a really well-known true crime author named Carlton Stowers. And the book is sort of likened to In Cold Blood and Fatal Vision. I don't really get the Fatal Vision connection, but the In Cold Blood I do. Because In Cold Blood was one of those cases in the middle of the heartland of the United States that no one could understand why people did what they did.
Yeah.
And this is that. You're not exactly sure why these 3 or 4 men, kind of a master planner named Munir Deeb, which we will find out why he may have had a motive, and 3 assholes, David Wayne Spence, 2 brothers, Gilbert Melendez and Anthony Melendez, why they may have done this. And I'm still not even sure. And that's what the other episodes are going to be about, because it was handled badly from minute 1. There were things done. I mean, here we are, 40 years later, and things are done differently by law enforcement now. But man, oh man, things were done then that, we can't imagine that they were allowed to be done.
Right.
Truman Simons, he was a patrolman at the time, who was, I think, 35 at the time. He shows up at this crime scene where 2 fishermen have found a young man sitting under a tree, sitting upright, deceased, with his own aviator sunglasses on his face, kind of askew. Someone put his sunglasses back on him after murdering him.
God, that's sick.
Yeah, it gets worse. I'm sorry, I'm going to prepare you right now. It gets worse. So Truman sees this young man and 2 other young men standing on the side of the lake, and is like, what's going on here? And he had to kind of get underneath the tree to see this young man sitting there. Now, Kenneth Franks had been reported missing earlier by his father. He had not come home the night before, and he was with Jill and Rayleen, and they were all 3 together, and none of them had come home. But Kenneth Franks' father was really on the search for him. So Truman shows up and finds this scene, and as he's standing there wondering why this young man is obviously stabbed, but there's not a lot of blood there, but he had been stabbed, and why his sunglasses were still on his face, and he hears a scream, and the 2 fishermen had found another body and then another body. So the 2 girls are there too.
Wow.
They've all 3 been found together around this lake, but it's an odd crime scene. Like the grass around the lake had been smashed down, showing that they had fought their killers, but there wasn't a whole lot of blood. Mm-hmm. So his theory is that they had been, right off the bat, that they had been murdered someplace else and brought there, but he couldn't understand why. Rayleen's orange Ford Pinto had been found on the other side of the lake, and they did not know how they all got to the other side of Cone Park without a car. But there's 3 of them. Kenneth's hands had been tied behind his back with his shoelaces. Jill, Jill was naked except for her bra, which had been tied around her ankle. Both girls had been sexually assaulted, but there was no semen. There was a startling lack of DNA at this scene. Even in 1982, when, DNA was being collected, and the officers that collected it, knowing that the future would somehow be able to examine these things, right. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of stuff to collect, unfortunately. That's part of what makes this case needing to be a double episode, because there's the murders, the convictions, and then there's a whole lot of aftermath. There's 35 years of aftermath of what goes on with this case, and I'm not even sure it's still really, really solved. But, I think most people in law enforcement are going to say it's solved, but so many other people have questions, and I understand that why. So there was a couple of Bud Light cans found near Rayleen's body, but they, of course, had no fingerprints. The grass around the girls was, flattened down as if they'd kind of struggled. There was no knife. There was very little blood on the ground. And like I said, the medical examiner said that the girls had been sexually assaulted, but there was no discernible DNA to be taken. So they don't know what's happening. And everyone in town is so upset at the death of 3 young people. Even though Kenneth was 18, the other 2 girls are 17. So they're like kids. Yeah. And everyone is like, do we need to keep our door shut? Is there someone? And these are 3 kids who had, maybe not the easiest lives growing up, but they sure didn't have enemies who would want to kill them. Right. So it gets more strange as time goes on, and a few months go by, and people are like, calling in, I think it was someone in a gang. I think there was a biker gang that was bragging. I think there was a satanic group. And I just have to be honest, we've covered a couple of cases with satanic panic, and I'm not a big believer. I believe there are, groups that worship Satan. I also don't think they spend a lot of time sacrificing babies or finding teenagers I just don't.
It makes for good movies, though.
Right. It is very good to be that dramatic. It's very good. But it's if you're writing a book or something. I just don't think it happens as often in the world as, there are plenty of other real life boogeymen. I just don't think we need to think it's groups of, robe wearing.
2 words.
Uh-oh.
Helter Skelter.
Right, but they were not a satanic group.
Yeah, but when you watch the movie, when you read the story, it just feels very satanic. Cult, definitely cult.
Cult. You are exactly correct. And it's funny you say that. I don't know if you know, that's sort of, in my mind, the intro of what, because I had someone ask me the other day, what made you get into solving cases? And I was like, I do not solve cases. I am a big mouth bitch with a microphone. Law enforcement solves cases. But what made me interested in true crime? 12 years old, I buy a copy of Helter Skelter for $0.25 at a yard sale. That was my entree, and I lived in Independence, Kentucky, and I was convinced Charles Manson was on his way to kill me.
And that right there is how these rumors and how it's just stuck in our brain that there are nut jobs from cults, whether they're satanic or
just like
Manson driven. That there are crazy people out there.
Ego, narcissism driven, that you want people to follow you because you're so whatever. Yeah, I was just convinced Charles Manson was coming to kill me. I'm not sure what I had done at the age of 12. But also, the people that he killed didn't do anything either. So he didn't need. That was probably the first time I knew in my brain that, you always think of TV shows like somebody kills someone because they want their girlfriend or they want their money or they want
motive.
Yep. Sex, money, or revenge. And Charles Manson had none of those. Eventually you could say money or maybe sex. But it wasn't even that. It was his desire to be, looked at as king. And that wasn't going to happen. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. And this is why this case, the Lake Waco murders, is still so 35 years later fraught with, 35, 40 years later, still so fraught with so much, because there wasn't a great amount of evidence, while three of the 4 people involved, one is a mastermind, 3 who actually carried it out, if you believe that story, 3 of them confessed and then all recanted. And the one who was sort of, considered, I don't know, not the mastermind, but the leader of the murdering pack, is just never said he never did anything, and actually kind of became a little bit manipulated, which you'll see. This is why it's going to be a couple of episodes. Truman Simons, he will not let go. He is unhappy working at Waco PD. He's let them know that he's going to be leaving probably at the end of the year, and he does. He becomes the chief of a sheriff's department. But he will not let this case go. And one of his coworkers said when he got on the trail of something, you couldn't get him off. He would work it like a bird dog around the clock. I don't know how he does it, and I don't want to know. And that's really the truth. He is a fascinating person in that he liked to show up at scenes, and you'll see he finds something after the case is adjudicated that's pretty fascinating, that just because he dug around, literally dug into the ground with a stick and found something. But in Truman Simmons' career, he's like, I could feel violence in the air. I could sense, I know this is going to sound woo-woo, I could sense and connect to a perpetrator that did the deed. And he had gone to the area again where these 3 teenagers are found and said, I couldn't feel any violence here. So he was convinced it happened somewhere else, which, made a little bit of sense.
Do we know if this was a common occurrence with crimes with him, that he would have feelings?
Yes.
Okay. So this is nothing new.
Not new.
Okay.
Not new at all. So they get hundreds of tips, but there's a tip that comes in from a 17-year-old girl who had lived at the same kind of Methodist home where Kenneth and Jill had lived and met, but hadn't dated until they graduated and got out of the Methodist home. And her name is Lisa Cater. And she said a man named Munir Deeb, who is a Jordanian immigrant, he was only 23 at the time, he had a business called the Rainbow Drive Inn. It was a convenience store across from the Methodist home where all these young kids had sort of lived with their, kind of difficult childhoods. He walked with a limp, and he went by the nickname Lucky. So Lisa and her friend had gone to the movies with Munir Deeb, aka Lucky, and it was a movie that had a murder in it. And Munir said, I did it. I killed those kids. So she calls the police and says, he did this. And the police are like, what would be the motive for a 23-year-old owner of a convenience store to murder 3 kids? So they were aware of him because they had gone to his store. And he apparently was going through some financial issues because the bank was going to take his store away from him. Now, in a very odd offshoot, he had taken out an insurance policy on an employee.
Wow.
An accidental death policy on an employee. Now, during the trial of these 3 men, it said that an insurance agent took the stand and said, that's a very common thing to do. I've never had an employer.
What?
I know. I've never had an employer take out an insurance policy on me that I know of. Jinx, owe me a Coke. Yeah, I think that's odd. And he was 23. Do you know a lot of 23-year-olds who are starting a business who have the wherewithal to get insurance?
No.
Right. You might get business insurance, property insurance. You're not going to get insurance on your employees. Now, he supposedly was in love with this employee that he took the policy out on. And here's another, I'm going to call this far-fetched. Truman, the investigator, said that one of the girls, Jill, that was murdered, could easily be mistaken for Gail, the woman who was the employee and the crush that Munir Deeb had on his employee. And because Munir Deeb didn't, participate in the murders, that maybe these three, hopheads killed the wrong girl.
Okay.
I feel like that's really far over on the side. I don't know that that's true. I just don't know that that's true. And I think that's probably why you're going to find out Munir Deeb's conviction got overturned.
Okay.
Because, he was indicted as the mastermind. I think that theory went away because he was a weirdo. He didn't like Kenneth Franks because Kenneth Franks made fun of him and called him Abdul and made fun of his limp. Mm-hmm. But that's hardly a reason to kill him and two other women. And,
But he's about to lose his store.
But he's not going to get, unless you really tie in the thing that, he was in love with Gail, the woman he took the insurance policy out on. It was an accidental death policy. Yeah. I don't know if a murder qualifies. She didn't die in a plane wreck or a car crash or slip and fall. So, I think that's got some holes in it.
Okay.
I'm not saying Kenneth Franks and the Melendez brothers didn't kill these three people, because I feel like they probably did. Even though there isn't a preponderance of evidence, they all confessed in one way or another. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We've all seen false confessions, but I don't know. I don't think Munir Deeb was involved. I think we're talking about people with a whole lot of problems, and you can lump people together and say they're all working together and they're assholes. I'm not buying it. Mm-hmm. I'm not buying it. So I'm going to say Munir Deeb was a weirdo, but I think he was off to the side. And even though this young girl, Lisa Cater, said, they're watching this movie and he's like, I did it, I killed them. His answer is, I was just kidding, and I apologized later and said I was joking. And, Lisa Cater said it didn't sound like a joke to her. So, unfortunately, 40 years ago, a lot of this case is built on hearsay.
Right.
And that's uncomfortable, because while you want justice and you want the people who did this to be caught, you also don't want the wrong people to be convicted of something.
So he really got dragged in because of, we say stupid stuff all the time. Oh my God,
are you kidding me? How many times have I said I'm going to kill someone? Like daily?
Yeah. You threaten me when I walk in the door.
It's how I say hello and that I love you. Why do you spurn my love?
Yeah, that's weird to me, but I wonder, I don't know what the makeup of this area is racially.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
But I just wonder.
It's Waco, Texas. Yes, you do.
I wonder how the fact that his nickname was Mohammed. Abdul.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So no, his real name is Munir, but Kenneth Franks would call him Abdul. And that.
I think I just racially slurred him too, didn't I? Mohammed, Abdul, whatever. Exactly. But I just wonder if his name was Chad.
Right.
Whether or not he
Jeff.
would have. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Whether or not that
he
was
Jordanian. He was a Jordanian immigrant
in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Waco, Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could. I'm telling you, everyone else. Well, the Melendez brothers are Hispanic, but so everyone else is white. And honestly, the person that they think is the biggest monster was David Spence, who was white and difficult. Mm-hmm. He was. Look, hurt people. And that's not a good enough excuse. We've all experienced hurt. It doesn't mean we turn around and hurt someone else. It can be a pattern. David Spence had a difficult, childhood, but he did terrible things too. He was in jail when they kind of tried to indict him on this case already, and he had done a terrible thing. I'm sorry. I find this just terrible. So his street name was Chili, and he had done, he got married at the age of 16 because in Texas, the age of consent was 16. He had a kid at the age of 18 and then was divorced by the age of 20. And he had done a lot of, stupid bullshit. And one of them was with one of the Melendez brothers, and he had taken a knife and cut a young boy after demanding he perform oral sex on one of the Melendez brothers. Right.
Okay, that's sick.
Yes.
What is that?
That's a hurt person who hurts other people. It is not an excuse. It is not an excuse.
I mean, I don't even know where to go with that.
Thank you.
I mean, if it were on him, but there are two people here involved. So Melendez's brother, you're okay with that?
No, Melinda's brother participated too.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. And it was an underage boy.
That's sick. That is sickness.
Right. That is why Truman was like, look, what we have here is a guy who is a sexual predator who uses a knife to get what he wants and did something terrible to a young man. And he was already in jail for that, for the sexual abuse thing. So, it's like Truman goes to the DA and says, I think that David Spence, Gilbert Melendez, and Anthony Melendez were hired by Munir Deeb to kill Rayleen Rice, Kenneth Franks, and Jill Montgomery. And that's how they all know each other, because David Spence had already been arrested and convicted of, forcing a young man to perform oral sex on Anthony Melendez with a knife. He's like, hey, I've got this. This is all together one thing. I think this guy can do something worse, which is if he's drunk or stoned or given money, he would, go under the ruling of Munir Deeb and say, I'll kill those 3 kids for $5,000, which he was supposed to get with the insurance policy. So I don't know that that's a good enough motive.
So he thought it was the girl he had a crush on.
Right.
Paid them.
By mistake. Right. But not. Yeah. That's the part I just can't get a hold of. I think Kenneth Franks and Tony Melendez and Gilbert Melendez did this on their own.
Right.
I don't think Munir Deeb had anything to do with it. I just don't. He was just a weirdo.
Mm-hmm. Random people at the lake at the wrong time.
Yes.
With the wrong people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think they saw a guy and 2 girls, and it's 3 guys, and they thought, I can take advantage of them. The girls' purses and Jill's paycheck that she had just cashed were all gone. Mm-hmm. All stolen. They didn't steal the car, but still, it feels like, I'm not saying because David Spence was in the Scorpions motorcycle gang that this is second nature to him, but I think he has a history of doing other weird shit.
Right.
That's why I don't find it too far removed that he could do this. And, there's another case in Texas that I covered that 2 girls were walking across a field and a group of like 4 guys. Sometimes I don't know what that thing is where one person's bad and they can convince other people to be bad with them.
It's just the pack mentality.
Yeah.
It's frightening to me how many times, especially in light of cell phones now, people will watch something through a cell phone, record it with a cell phone, and won't help.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And people are just all around doing it and not
wanting to get the footage.
It's just a pack mentality.
Yeah, you're right. And I guess it's been around since humans were invented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. So the DA is like, okay, I think maybe we should take a look at this, even though what he said is, while David Spence is in jail waiting on the other sexual assault case of the young boy, 7 inmates come forward and say, he told me he killed those kids.
Wow.
I know.
I mean, one jailhouse snitch is one thing, but 7. Was he bragging?
No, they said he would be talking and say, you know what, I killed those kids. I did it because Munir Deeb is going to pay me. He said different things to different people. And the whole problem with that is, Angelique, it's all hearsay. Right. Do you believe inmates?
I mean, jailhouse snitch. Look, I watch Law and Order, okay? Jail, which by the way is back. Hello.
Yeah.
I thought it was a thing.
It is a thing, and they're
admissible in court. I wouldn't believe a word out of their mouths, but
admissible one thing. You're right. Occasionally, it's considered inadmissible. Can you, any defense attorney worth their salt, say, Are you getting time shaved off? Are you getting paid? Are you getting extra money in the commissary? Are you getting?
Conjugals.
Yeah.
3 more conjugals a month.
Yeah. Your girlfriend can come and spend on your dick an extra time per month than normal. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot about this case that it's breaking my heart because you want it to be solved the right way. And I know Truman never wanted to do things that would compromise the case, but I think maybe some of the things he did were questionable.
Okay.
So he gets a job with the sheriff's office, and he works at the jail overnight so he can get close to David Spence. And he does. He works overnight. They have long talks about God and life and love and kids.
Okay.
And he allows David Spence's girlfriend to have longer phone calls with him.
Phone calls he's recording, I hope. I mean, that's crazy.
Yes.
Because once you start forming that relationship, you can no longer be objective.
I agree with you, and that is the basis of the book Careless Whispers. It is really I think it's well written. Carlton Stowers is a great true crime writer, and it's a good book. I feel like it's even-handed. Mm-hmm. I think he points out the positives and the negatives of the whole thing. Truman said that he whispered into Jill's ear and to Rayleen's ear and to Kenneth's ear at the scene, I'm going to make sure whoever did this goes to jail forever. You're not going to be forgotten. And you'll find out in a minute that he actually follows through in a physical, tangible way, especially for one girl. So he talks to David Spence a lot. And David Spence's girlfriend, eventually they figure out she's not going to get anything out of him. And she breaks up with him and he cries and cries. And Truman's is like, get it out, let it out, And David Spence isn't dumb. He's like, the only friend I have is the guy in here who's trying to pin these murders on me. He's a talker and he gets lonely in jail. Mm-hmm. And he knows the only person who's there for him now is the guy who thinks he did it. Truman talks to him about God and about, retribution. And at one point, David Spence says, did I really kill those kids? And Truman says, I think you did. And he said, well, then why don't I know? Which, they say O.J. Simpson didn't think he killed Ron and Nicole. I don't, maybe, David Spence is a sociopath who he doesn't really think he did anything wrong. I know. I love that you're shaking your head. You're like, you're so full of shit, lady.
I mean, especially if the murders happen somewhere else. And it's one thing if it's one person.
Right.
But this is 3 people.
Right. And they're young and
other people involved. And if it's a knife, then that means lots of blood. That means physical contact. It's not like a gun.
Right. Where you can take someone out quickly.
Yeah, boop, right. It's, little gunpowder residue, little shaking from the blowback, but that's it. No, there's no way.
It's up close and personal.
And the fact that he doesn't know these people, I think it's different, like a blinding rage when you know someone, like you black out and you just stab them to death. But you don't even know these people.
You're making a good point. But okay, so I have a few other pieces of information I'm going to give you that it might change your mind. So here comes, David Spence is convicted. In the meantime, 28-year-old Gilbert Melendez, who'd had a lot of other criminal charges against him, assault, intent to murder. He had 7 years after he pled guilty for aggravated sexual abuse, blah, blah, blah. So David Spence is found guilty and given 90 years, but he was allowed to remain in jail because he was helping with the investigation. And Gilbert Melendez was like, I wasn't there. And then one day, Truman goes to visit him because he says, I'm kind of willing to talk. And Gilbert Melendez says, I was there. I'll testify. but I don't want the death penalty. So Gilbert Melendez and Tony Melendez, the brothers, both say they were there. They gave Truman Simmons some information that wasn't known. Like, yes, ma'am, are you raising your hand? I love that you raise your hand. Yes, Angelique, may I help you?
Why would these guys volunteer this information? I mean, somebody's already been convicted, right? 90 years. Why would... I'm in the clear.
No, they're not.
Okay.
Their trials are coming up.
Oh, they're coming up. Okay, thank you.
But they were going to be... It was going to be a death penalty case because 3 young people...
Got you.
So Gilbert Melendez is like, I'm going to testify. I'll testify. So he testifies and he says David wanted to have sex with Jill. Jill did not want to, so he raped her in the car. And then he ended up killing them. Now, it makes sense that there was more than one person to kill 3 young people who were, in good shape and healthy. One could have run or whatever. They didn't have weapons because they weren't, expecting anything. But it's hard to stab 3 people unless you take control of them all at once. And it's hard to take control of 3 people when you're one person. Maybe intimidation by fear, but these were kids that weren't like sheltered, kids from the suburbs. These were kids that had a tough life and,
they knew how to take care of themselves in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they were scrappy. So I'm going to say. So Gilbert Melendez said, we saw Kenneth Franks and Jill and Rayleen driving around and they were drinking and smoking and we all ended up together at Cone Park. And David Spence said, hey, we've got more beer and pot. Why don't you get in our car? That is a plausible explanation as to how they got moved from their car to David Spence's car and got to the other part of the world. So why were the bodies there? Well, that's because Gilbert Melendez said, this is what happened. We did this terrible thing. David did most of it. We helped him tie them up. We enticed them into the car with beer and weed. David Spence raped Jill and then Rayleen and then killed Kenneth, made him watch and then kill him. I don't know if that's true or not. Why was there no semen found? Well, there was a jailhouse snitch who said, David Spence told me he raped him with a whoopee stick. I don't know what that means. Was it a stick lying near them? You would think the medical examiner could say they were assaulted with something other than, a penis, but there was no semen found.
That's freaking sick.
A whoopee stick. Yeah.
I don't even know what a whoopee stick is.
Right. No one knows.
But we are talking about a guy who tried to get a little boy to suck somebody else's wiener.
While using a knife and cutting him to get him to do it. So maybe a whoopee stick is something he used quite often. And then when Truman said, well, what did you do after that? Oh, we went home and we watched TV. We killed 3 people and we went home and we watched TV. So Tony Melendez, his brother, says, we were in David Spence's station wagon. And David Spence had not bought a station wagon until after the murders. Gilbert Melendez says, we were in this car. Truman said, their inconsistencies are because they were on drugs and alcohol.
Right. That's
plausible. That could, you could have memory issues because of it. I'm telling you, there's so many layers. I feel like this case has more like tentacles than 8 or 9 octopi. So here's another of the tentacles. A new assistant DA came to Truman Simmons and says, here's what we're going to do to get this case completely adjudicated and get these guys indicted without a question. I believe, and this is so sad at this point, I believe that some of the bite marks on Jill come from one or more of these defendants, David Spence, and forensic odontology, which at this point has now been blown out of the water as junk science, and it's heartbreaking. He does a bite test on David Spence and then uses some of the tests from Jill's body and says that it's absolutely David Spence's bite. So they present that as evidence, and this is kind of the beginning of the forensic odontology, and I know we're going to have more about this on both sides. We're going to have more in another episode, and I know you're sitting on great information and a great resource, and I'm sitting on one too, which not sitting on him actually, but my dentist. So he has agreed to be interviewed, and I'm
excellent.
Yeah, I'm jazzed about that. So, do I think all forensic odontology is junk science? No. Do I think a lot of it is? I can't say no, because I think yes. And here's my theory. I did not know it until I'm, far into my dotage and never having had braces or anything else. Now, at my old age, I'm wearing a retainer. Teeth move all the time. Odontology has kind of been blown out of the water. I'm sorry.
So, I feel like we skipped over something, and okay. I know this is going to be a 4-part episode.
Well, not 4, but okay.
But I want to go back to, I don't remember doing it. So there's nothing other than him doing a little drugs that would account for him, quote unquote, not remembering.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I don't think he has like a dissociative identity disorder. Like actually that was brought up too. I shouldn't have said that. God damn it. Those things. Truman said, "Hey, do you think maybe you have another personality?" I think he was I think he wanted to solve this case so much, and I think he used techniques that may, at this moment, 40 years later, be frowned upon. Mm-hmm. Suggesting to someone who is, accused of a murder that maybe they have another personality is bullshit. If they tell you they have one, then you take all of the time you need to find all the doctors who can confirm or deny it. But to suggest it so that someone can say, maybe I do. I mean, it was a terrible game of cat and mouse. And
who was the cat?
Right. At one point, both of them were cats, and at one point, both of them were mice. In each other's weird-ass little game is my theory. My theory.
Well, yeah.
And who gives a shit about Melissa's theory?
I do. It's your show, so that's why people are listening for your theory, Melissa.
Nobody gives a shit about my theory.
We'll see based on clicks.
Well, so November 21st of 1983, a McLennan County jury indicted Munir Deeb as the mastermind, David Spence, and Tony and Gilbert Melendez for the murder of the 3 teenagers. And the DA's like, we started with nothing and we pieced it together. And that's sort of true. But we found the true story. I don't know that they did find the whole true story. But so David Spence is tried first. He's given the death penalty. They're saying he's a devil worshiper. I don't think so. Gilbert and Tony Melendez, and then Munir Deeb, and they're each charged with 3 counts of capital murder. And Munir Deeb's case, like 6 years later, is overturned, and he leaves the country. And I don't blame him. And I don't know that he actually, hired these 3 guys to kill these teenagers. The theory is, he wanted his girlfriend, Gail, murdered, and she looked like Jill. The jailhouse informants, 7 of them that actually took the stand, said that David Spence said he, had bit Jill's nipples, and then the odontology says that it's, his bite mark on Jill's nipple. And, then David Spence said in jail, this Iranian motherfucker, which he wasn't, he was Jordanian, wanted us to beat up those kids because of a bad drug deal. Beat them up and it went too far and you sexually assaulted them and killed them. We're not dealing with intelligent, thoughtful people here, or people who have planned out the perfect murder. I think it may have been a crime of opportunity. That's, just also my theory. So David Spence is put to death in 1997 in the death chamber. Tony Melendez dies in 1998 from complications from AIDS. And Gilbert Melendez dies in 2017 from cancer. So at the end, Gilbert Melendez is saying, I recant my confession. I said it so that I didn't get the death penalty. I just don't know that that's enough. I don't know that that's enough to believe him. Does that make sense?
I've never been arrested. I've never been interrogated. But I mentioned before, I have watched Law and Order.
You've watched enough to know.
Enough to
Just
know.
say, attorney.
Right.
That's your only word, attorney.
But I would also say if I think I'm smarter or I'm dumb, if I think I'm smarter than the cop, the detective, or if I'm just dumb and I think what I used to think at 18, well, I don't have anything to worry about. I'm innocent.
Right.
And there are plenty of people who feel that way, and that's their prerogative.
Yes.
They'll be in jail with the rest of the people who felt that way.
Right.
I could just see how easy it would be to sit there and start, I don't want to say getting confused.
That's a great way to put it.
Getting confused, getting tripped up. I mean, I'm a terrible liar, so I really try not to. But even if someone suspects me of lying, I start acting like I'm lying. I start trying harder to look innocent, which makes me look more like I'm lying.
That's a perfect way to put it, because I think you speak for a lot of people.
Okay, good.
I think that's me. I think I can't play poker. I have no poker face. I am a terrible liar. You know how I think and feel at all times. I'm not sure how to hide it. I don't know. I couldn't. Mark Humphreys taught me, just say, lawyer.
Right, lawyer. So I could see, these guys getting tripped up, but at the same time, somebody else was there, because this one person could not have done those 3 murders like that.
And you are so smart. That's why you're perfect for this. There is a theory about another person and an accomplice. 2 men, it's theorized, and we'll get to those 2 men in the next episode. But I want to tell you that a week after the trial, Truman wanted to take another look around the lake. And he went with, this is smart, he went with an investigator from the DA's office. So the 2 of them are walking around Cone Park. And about 25 yards from where Tony Melendez said that Jill was murdered, because on the stand, Tony and Gilbert Melendez's stories pretty much jibed on the stand. Whether they were coached, I don't know. But Truman was overcome with like this strong feeling, and he grabbed a stick and started moving leaves around, and there in the dirt was a gold bracelet. And he picked it up, and he's like, my gut told me to pick this up, and I think this is Jill's. And he took it to Jill's mother and aunt, and they said, well, she definitely owned a bracelet like that. And he felt like that was closure for him. Like, okay, I did it the right way, even though we can debate whether he did or not. He feels like that was, whether it's her from beyond or whether it's just his gut finding something that, could be an important thing. I think it's very interesting that he found that. So Carlton Stour's book, Careless Whispers, won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for fact-based crime. It won the Book of the Year award. And even though Truman Simmons, took a lot of satisfaction from having fulfilled his promise to the kids, he's like, look, I'm a peacemaker. I just followed the direction that was pointed out to me. Mm-hmm. And this is pretty fascinating. So Jill's father worked at a granite company. Joe Montgomery's father worked at a granite company, but he was so devastated by his daughter's death, he couldn't put a headstone up. He just couldn't didn't want to put a headstone up. Truman Simmons and Carlton Stours paid for a beautiful slab of Dakota mahogany granite. It's decorated with one of Jill's mother's photos that she had of her, a poem, and the inscription Forever 17. So he kept his promise that he would avenge Jill's death and also make sure she's never forgotten.
Are you doing hip openers over there?
I probably need a bunch of them. And this is literally just the beginning of this case, and we're going to have more detailed information in episode 2. And it's, I love the way someone described it as one of the most serpentine cases of criminal justice in Texas history. If you happen to know anything about the Lake Waco murders that might shed more light on it, even though it has been adjudicated and there are still many questions, please contact the Waco Police Department at 254-750-7500. And more cowbell.